Today, I'm delighted to be talking to Joanne Appelby, CEO of OASES, an outdoor and sustainability education provider that's been running for 30 years. Hello, Joanne.
Hello, Meryl. Thank you very much for taking the time to chat to me.
Lovely. I really, really like taking children outside for active learning experiences as they're so different to those classroom lessons. Can you describe a couple of just outdoor learning programs that OASES provide?
Oh, we do lots of different ones, Meryl, and they've evolved over the years. We started off doing school grounds development because we recognised that at the time, this was probably 30 years ago, most school grounds were just grey desert and green desert. There was nothing in them at all. So we started there in improving the grounds for learning and play and doing teacher training on how to use the outdoors to enrich the curriculum and curriculum delivery. Since then, we were one of the forerunners. We brought forest schools up to the northeast. At the time, Bridgewater College was literally the only place doing it. And it was our chair of the board who recognised the potential of it. And he was like, Joanne, you need to get on board with this. We need to bring this up to the northeast. And so we did. And now we do the training element. We don't do so much of the delivery. We help schools out if they want to see it in practice. But we focus very much on training teachers on how to do forest schools delivery. And that worked really well. I think it was because it was a package. It was something that people could recognise. To those of us who've been doing it for a long time, it had very much its basis in earth education work. But I think because it involved very definite training, it linked very definitely to certain pedagogies, teachers were able to see its potential instantly. So that's really blossomed and bloomed. And that's been a fabulous success for outdoor learning, I think, because talking to most teachers now, they've heard of it if they're not doing it. So that's brilliant. And I think what we're doing at the moment is we're trying to take forest schools that next step further towards nature immersion and using it to improve pupil well-being through forest bathing. So we've taken the recognised practice of forest bathing and we've done a lot of research and practice and practicals to adapt it for young people. And we're seeing some absolutely heartwarming evidence of the impact that nature immersion can have on young people's mental health.
Absolutely. And last time I was in OASES, in the school you're based in, I saw loads of tents. Tell me about the tents.
Oh, well, we run a free network for schools that happens termly. And out of that network, we ask teachers to give us ideas of things that they, want support with to help them access outdoor learning. And a number of head teachers came forwards and said, we really want to do camping in our schools. But our cohort, they don't have the money for the camping gear. So we put in some funding bids and Hayes Travel gave us the money to buy lots and lots of tents and roll mats and all of the rest of the paraphernalia that goes with camping. And so now we're hoping be next summer to offer it out as a service so that schools can do camping in their school grounds.
I love that idea. I think that would just add that different perspective because, from my experience, I'd say it really increases resilience. Being outside in nature just increases resilience and reduces anxiety. It might not even be it might not be related to climate or nature anxiety. It might be anxiety for what's going on at home, or what's going on in the classroom themselves, what's going on in their peer groups. Why do you think outdoor learning's got such a big impact on young people? Why is that?
I think it's impossible to say how it works. I think there's been lots of people who've tried and it's so multifaceted, it's impossible to say why outdoor learning and it works and why nature works. But I think if you went back to our roots, historically, for tens of thousands of years, human beings interacted with the natural world very, very closely. It's only really been since the Industrial Revolution that we slowly step further and further away. And we're at a point in society where we're probably the furthest away from nature than we've ever been. But I think there's something intrinsic in our DNA that that means we recognize that we're connected to nature, and we recognize that we need nature. And I think that's what we see as soon as we take young people outdoors. I don't know, there's almost like this sigh of relief.
Yeah, no, I get it. So in schools, we try and focus on evidence-based practice. Is there much research in this area?
Oh, in terms of outdoor learning, there's been various research papers released. Probably over the last 20 years has been a focus. One of the most influential was Robin Hamilton's Ofsted report in 2008. It was learning outside the classroom, how far should you go? And it found overwhelming evidence that learning outside the classroom contributed significantly to raising standards. But it needed to be an embedded practice. It couldn't be the one-off experience. It needed to happen, on a weekly basis, be part of the curriculum. Another very, very influential piece of research was conducted by Plymouth University called Natural Connections. This was a demonstration project. What they found was that 90% of the respondents that were involved in the project agreed that outdoor learning was useful for curriculum delivery, and that it had a positive impact on both teachers and pupils. And I think that's really, really significant, is that a lot of this work focuses on the pupils. This one looked at the impact on the teachers, and they found that teacher happiness levels improved as a result of engaging. So that's a massive thumbs up to any teacher wanting to explore outdoor learning. More recently, there's been the Children in Nature programme, which was funded by the Department of Education, and that acknowledged that there was a wealth of evidence showing that children who spend time outside in nature, they experience better mental health, physical health, and improved well-being generally. And during my career, I've seen outdoor learning move very much from a novelty and an experience, something one-off, to be enjoyed, so your school trip, to a lot of schools that I know are now working to embed it. And we're seeing things like forest schools being completed weekly, rather than just having this, let's have a nature day today, it's a nice day, in the summer we're going off curriculum. And I think that's a massive change, and it's massively important, especially when children aren't getting out in nature as much as they should be. And I'd just like to add, we've recently done a research project working with Durham County Council, looking at the local nature recovery strategy. So we were doing a survey with, it will be over 40 schools, secondary and primary. So we work with thousands of children. I think we've got over 1,600 respondents to this particular survey. And it was all about identifying what nature they enjoyed, but also part of it was about what they knew of nature. And it was a bit scary, the findings that came back, because a lot of the children couldn't identify common species. So hedgehogs were porcupines. And the influence of TV was coming out really, really strongly. So there's a real nature disconnect. And this is in Durham, which has got quite a large rural area. So I dread to think what it would be like in more urban localities.
No, it is quite worrying. Not only do we have this shifting baseline of the huge declines in our wildlife, I think what you're saying about the fact that there's been so many research reports on this, and actually even just looking at those teachers, if you start doing outside learning, quite often it just builds through the school. Yeah. So and they wouldn't do that unless they saw positive results. So evidence-based practice, let's just look at those teachers who are doing it and doing it well, and yeah, absolutely it does. One of the best bits of enrichment I ever gave the children at my school was we're in sort of rural Northumberland, and we took them out to the beach, the coast, and with the old Dove Marine Lab did some amazing enrichment, and watching the kids looking at rock pools, understanding ecology of our and the importance of our marine systems, even though they didn't live very close to the sea, was absolutely it was foundational in terms of my belief in the power of outdoor learning. But there's lots and lots of challenges. Have you got any advice to teachers about how to address any obstacles that taking kids outside?
yeah, there's lots. I suppose what we recognise, when we do this through our active learning accreditation, we always say to gain the accreditation, you've got to do 3 lessons as a minimum outdoors. And that's because we recognise that in the first session, everything inevitably goes wrong. So, you know, I had one teacher, when writing up her portfolio, was described it beautifully, because she said she set everything out wonderfully. The children were all as high as kites. She got them outside. All of her resources had blown away, and the children were uncontrollable. And she said she got back in and she was like, I'm never doing that again, ever, ever, ever. But the children, through their pester power, got her to do the second lesson. And she said she went out, and this time she was more equipped. She was ready. She'd got the resources. She'd made sure that nothing was blowing away. She'd focused more on using nature rather than taking stuff out, because that's important. If you're just kind of taking everything that you would use in the classroom outside, you're not really getting the true benefit. So she reflected, used like the natural resources rather than bits of paper and lamination that was fly everywhere. She gave the children set boundaries, so she didn't have that worry in her head. She organised them inside, ready for outside, because they weren't used to being outside. And she said it went brilliantly. You know, it was such a contrast. And then by the 3rd lesson, she was the one that was willing. And so you had both willing teachers and willing people. And that's when it really, really works. But that first time, it's be ready for the weather, be ready for the unpredictability. Don't just take your resources from inside outside. Use the natural environment. And I think one thing that I try to really push in the courses is that think about how you're using the outdoor environment, you know,
Yeah.
and use it appropriately. Don't do your analysis of data outside, do that inside, but go and collect your data outside.
I did a really, really good bit of CPD the other day, and it was about outdoor learning. And this a wonderful educator took us outside and said, right, we're talking about year 5 materials. And she said, make a pixie house out of outdoor materials. What's useful, what's not useful, how can you build it, you know? And so it was literally looking, and she'd taken a few little bits of plastic and things out, but then we talked about, well, that would be a problem, because if you left it there, then it wouldn't degrade. And it was just, for me, being a science teacher, I've got my lessons that, you know, are based on materials, and we're in the lab and we're testing, you know, porosity and waterproofness and all the rest of it. But it was like opening my eyes again. Makes me want to stay in the classroom in some ways, because it was just, you know, a very different way of looking at things. And I think that's exactly what outdoor learning is to me. It's about looking at things differently that relate to our learning, and you can embed it across the curriculum, which is so amazing.
Yes.
You know, you can look at almost any aspect of the curriculum, whether it's in maths or English or RE or science or geography, and you can say, actually, I could do this part of that lesson, as you say, data handling, computers, all the rest of it inside. But, you know, so I'd definitely say that, you know, for me, outdoor learning had been, you know, a hugely positive experience in my teaching, and for my kids at school.
I think the other thing that outdoor learning brings that children desperately need at the moment is that ability to talk to one another and work in teams. You know, there's
Skills, yes,
certain
skills
things.
building, really, yes,
Yeah,
that
there's certain
communication.
things.
Yep. So,
There's certain things that outdoor learning really facilitates that it's really hard to facilitate in a classroom, and things like noise levels in a classroom. If you get them all in their teams working on a specific thing, they can't move around, and you know there's so much noise and it just feels chaotic. Whereas if you do that same thing outside, it's a lot calmer, and you want them to talk outside. And I suppose looking at it in terms, again, of society's progression, especially since we've had things like COVID happen, young people's ability to talk to each other, work as teams, we've definitely seen a drop off in that. So, but outdoor learning really encourages and facilitates that. And so it develops the whole child, doesn't it?
So absolutely. So just before we go, because I know, you know, we quite like, you know, a short chat is fantastic. Could talk for hours about this totally, but we'll leave that for another day. So in terms of, as a final message to teachers who are listening to this, you know, what would you say in terms of, you know, quite often they're tired, you know, and concerned about potential safeguarding issues with kids all outside, and they might not feel that they can act with much autonomy. What would be your last message to them to say, you know, outdoor learning is, you know, it can be part and parcel of our day-to-day curriculum?
Oh, I definitely can. I think you just need to go and look at the research, the schools that are doing it and doing it well. And there's a lot of schools out there that are implementing outdoor learning in their curriculum, and they've got better teacher happiness, better pupil happiness, and they are attaining and achieving. So, you know, if they can do it, you can do it. And it's just a matter of doing that brave step. And I think once you've done it, you realize it's easy, it's enriching, and it's enjoyable. Um,
It is. And
and
whatever the weather, really, as long as it's not absolutely tipping down or -10, you know, really, I've been out in all weathers and done school gardening or done, you know, lesson outside, and, you know, no, you know, it's always nice to get back in the warmth if you've been outside for a couple of hours, but no, it's always beneficial. And as you see, I'm a happy, you know, I'm happy in, you know, even thinking back on some of the fantastic things that I've done outside. So um,
yeah,
wonderful. It's been a really sweet discussion. Thank you so much, Joanne. And there's a lot of change happening. We know that, you know, what's going on in the Department of Education. They'll be thinking about how we can make kids happier, because actually,
mm.
you know, we want them to be learning well. We want them to be happy in their learning. And, you know, outdoor education is definitely should be on that agenda.
Oh, definitely. It needs to be for the world generally, because we're getting so far removed from nature. And if we don't have that connection and don't have that understanding, we're going to make poor decisions in the future.
Absolutely, and totally embrace that. So thank you. It's been wonderful. Joanne, lovely.
Thank you very much, Meryl. Take
Bye.
care.
That's it.